Hello and welcome to The Top Story, a podcast with headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Tian Yu. Coming up in this edition, tens of thousands of people have taken to the streets in Spain amid rising costs of living. Palestinian factions Fatah and Hamas ended talks in Cairo without an agreement, but negotiations will continue. U.S. President Joe Biden visited Florida to survey the damage from Hurricane Milton. We begin in Europe. The housing crisis has caused an unprecedented year of protest in Spain, with young people and lower-income families suffering most from out-of-control housing and rental prices. Ken Brown was at a march in Madrid where over 22,000 people voiced their anger.
A rental strike, a general strike. That's what people here are calling for, as 40 different social and political groups have brought thousands of people onto the streets of Madrid. House prices have soared by 50% in 10 years here in the Spanish capital, making home ownership a distant dream for many. Rent prices have skyrocketed too. In some parts of Spain, they have risen by 100% in 15 years. A perfect storm of high interest rates, foreign investment, short-term lets, high demand and a very low stock of public and social housing has left many Spaniards in limbo.
We can't go on like this. The prices have to come down.
I pay over 30% of my salary to rent a room in a shared house. We can't even make ends meet. It's outrageous the price we pay to share a half-decent house with my child.
But there are places where things are working, like Vienna, so we would like to follow the Viennese model, where there's lots of social housing, affordable for rent.
The Spanish constitution states that everyone has the right to a dignified place to live. But experts say that 5.5 million households are now at risk of residential exclusion. Spain needs to build over 500,000 houses, experts say, just to keep up with demand. Mallorca, the Canary Islands and Barcelona have all seen protests against over-tourism because locals feel they are being priced out of the housing market. One march in Barcelona even saw protesters aiming water pistols at visitors, chanting, "Tourists, go home." In Barcelona, a house that goes up on the rental market receives on average 350 applications. Now activists say they are building support for rent and general strikes as more conflict looks likely on the horizon in a problem that doesn't have any easy solution.
That was Ken Brown reporting from Madrid. China says it has officially invited the European Union to send a technical team to China to continue talks on proposed tariffs on Chinese-made electric vehicles. A Commerce Ministry spokesperson says major differences remain and the two sides have not reached a solution despite significant progress on some issues during negotiations. The European Commission earlier voted to slap additional tariffs on Chinese EVs. Hungary was one of the EU countries that opposed the decision. Pablo Gutierrez spoke with President Gábor Gabellini of the Hungarian Association of Automotive Dealers.
Recently, the European Union moved to impose tariffs for 5 years on Chinese electric vehicles. Do you believe this was the right approach?
I think it was a hurry approach, a quick approach, but not the best, because imposed tariffs is not give a solution for the problem. We have some difficulties, we need to find some solutions, but the imposed tariff wouldn't help it.
They say that these both split the European Union. You had 5 countries, including Hungary, that voted against it, but there were 12 countries that abstained. Is that telling? Does that send a message?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's in the economy, we need some rational answers from rational questions. So, and the imposed tariffs, more emotional answer than a rational. For this reason, I don't believe that it will work. I don't believe that it will work long time. Maybe for a short time. Maybe it wouldn't exist maximum till the end of the year, because I think that in the technology, in the electric vehicles technology, the Asians, the Chinese, ahead of Europe. So if we want to make closer, we want to smaller gap, or we want to develop and quick develop, the only solution could be the cooperation and the negotiation.
That was the president of the Association of Automotive Dealers in Hungary on why he thinks tariffs on Chinese EVs will not help Europe. In the Middle East, Palestinian factions Fatah and Hamas have concluded talks in Cairo about the future management of Gaza. They did not reach an agreement, but mediator Egypt says negotiations will continue. Atlel Marouki spoke with political analysts about the significance of the talks.
Cairo hosted a series of talks between the biggest two Palestinian factions, Fatah and Hamas, to discuss the management of the occupied territories after the Israeli war ends. It is the first meeting between the two groups since the reconciliation agreement in Beijing in July. Participants discussed an Egyptian proposal to create a 15-member committee to lead a future Gaza administration.
Netanyahu is rejecting that Fatah, the Palestine Liberation Organization, or Hamas, control the Gaza Strip. That's why the formation of this committee was suggested. During the talks, however, Hamas rejected the proposal and insisted that Beijing's outcomes will be implemented. That is a technocratic government that leads the unity of Palestinian institutions.
Hamas suggested that the committee that will manage Gaza would be independent from Palestinian Authority. Fatah rejected that. It wants a unified authority because the absence of unity in Palestine was the main reason all previous peace negotiations have failed. If they manage to resolve that issue, there will be hope to revive peace talks.
After 3 days of talks, the Cairo negotiations concluded without announcing any outcomes. Egyptian Foreign Minister Badr Abdelati held a meeting with Fatah members. He rejected any administrative division between Gaza and the West Bank.
The continuation of the division is shameful for all Palestinian decision makers. It is time, after all the blood that has been shed, to overcome all differences and establish a Palestinian system that can bridge these gaps.
The Cairo proposed committee would be made up of members who are independent from any Palestinian faction. The purpose of this is to lead the operation of the Rafah crossing with Egypt, oversee the entry and distribution of relief aid, and the reconstruction of Gaza.
Frustrated by the Israeli presence in the buffer zone on the border between Egypt and Gaza, Cairo is pushing for the success of its proposal to govern Gaza and the West Bank. This step aims at interrupting Netanyahu's plan of maintaining military presence and controlling the Palestinian enclave. And to push its chances of success even further, Cairo will bring together 14 Palestinian factions to further discussion that administrative committee.
That was Atlel Marouki in Cairo. Turning to North America, residents of the U.S. state of Florida are in recovery mode in the aftermath of deadly Hurricane Milton. The storm has killed at least 17 people. U.S. President Joe Biden visited the state to survey the damage. Popim Punting has more.
Hurricane Milton swept across the state of Florida last Wednesday night, slamming into the west coast. At least 17 people died. The Category 3 storm brought heavy rain and flooding, and tornadoes that destroyed homes and businesses. Reconstruction costs will run into the billions of dollars. In the aftermath, nearly 900,000 are still without power, down from a peak of 3 million. There are gas shortages all across the state. On Sunday, President Joe Biden traveled to Florida to survey the damage, including undertaking an aerial tour of impacted areas. This is Biden's second trip to the state in less than 2 weeks, after he visited in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. Biden also met with officials before announcing $612 million in funding to assist with recovery and reconstruction efforts.
We've been in frequent contact, and it's in moments like this we come together to take care of each other, not as Democrats or Republicans, but as Americans. Americans who need help, and Americans who will help you if you were in the same situation. We are one United States.
Biden's funding announcement follows his approval Saturday of a major disaster declaration, which includes grants for temporary housing and home repairs.
That was Popim Punting reporting on the aftermath of Hurricane Milton in the United States. Finally, in Asia, Chinese Premier Li Qiang is in Pakistan, where he will attend a summit of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and pay an official visit. Daniel Khan has more on preparation work in Islamabad.
Islamabad is gearing up for a major international event with preparations in full swing ahead of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit. The city is being adorned with lights, flowers, flags and welcome banners as the federal capital gets a significant facelift for the upcoming meeting. Chinese Premier Li Qiang is leading a high-level delegation, making it the largest gathering of world leaders in the country since 2012's conclave of developing nations. India's Foreign Minister S.J. Shankar is set to attend, marking the first visit by a high-ranking Indian official to Pakistan in nearly a decade. As part of the preparations, the federal government is implementing strict measures, including a 3-day holiday from October 14th to 16th for residents of Islamabad and Rawalpindi. Schools will also remain closed, giving students a long weekend. The local administration is focused on landscaping along major roads and enhancing the aesthetics of the high-security zone where the delegates will be staying. The government has called for the expedited completion of all ongoing beautification and construction work in time for the summit.
That was Daniel Kang reporting. Now recapping today's headlines. Tens of thousands of people have taken to the streets in Spain amid rising costs of living. Palestinian factions Fatah and Hamas ended talks in Cairo without an agreement, but negotiations will continue. U.S. President Joe Biden visited Florida to survey the damage from Hurricane Milton. And that's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports, and culture, you can subscribe to The Beijing Hour, a one-hour podcast news magazine program. We welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Tian Yu. Thank you for listening.